an amazing day in the stock market. I mean, really amazing day in the stock market. We brought in the A-team. We bought Paul Schatz back. Paul, you had one bad earnings call. We'll talk about that later. What was the Paul's play?
Oh, I don't remember.
We'll figure it out. We were looking for you last week.
The play was stocks that when stocks rinse into earnings, they come out and rally on earnings.
Hey, we got Hillary Kramer, president and CIO of A&G Capital. Our man Jim Frischling's back with us, NewOak Capital president. And of course, so let's talk about the market in general, guys, because this was an amazing session, really. You had three Dow components, three of them this morning, all came out, all bad news, all of them went down. Earnings were bad, they all traded lower. And what happens to the market? We had the best session of the year. We had a great session yesterday, too. Think about it. Without IBM, the Dow would have been up 100 points. So the best session of the year, Jim, despite all of these big, huge, gargantuan losers.
Look, I think the geopolitical risk, or at least some of the headlines that were distracting people, we've been talking about Ebola and ISIS. You know what? That is so yesterday's news. So right now, America, there is a buy America.
But are we seeing a transition, though, in the market to new leadership? In other words, the market's saying, hey, we knew IBM was in trouble. We knew Coke was in trouble. We knew McDonald's was in trouble. Is there some sort of new leadership, then, in the stock market that investors are looking at that can take these indices higher despite bad news?
Look, I think it's somewhat stock-specific and sector-specific. I don't think you can just look at the Dow and get the direction. So I actually feel right now there is interest in deploying capital. Rates are going to stay low. It's a risk-on environment, and you're going to have to put money into the stock market.
Let me stop you right there.
But once that happens, if you're 75 years old, you're drawing money off those investments, you're going to be way behind inflation without stocks to hedge on the risk.
I want to agree with Paul. I think you got to throw out the old model right now because I think the old model did not anticipate CDs and money market and, in general, a fixed rate or an interest rate environment that is killing savers. So you're going to have to shift more money to stocks. You could build a portfolio of dividend payers to kind of make up for that yield, but you're going to have to change.
Listen, the millennials.
You just put a nice office in Connecticut, and so it might be too late for you to change your mind. But what do you think?
Look, I thought what was really interesting was the urbanization, the move into cities. And maybe it's not the biggest cities in the United States like New York or Chicago, but the fact is we're seeing multi-sector homes doing better than single-family homes, and you're seeing studies about this urbanization. So the fact is I think that's playing off each other significantly.
Here's the thing. Of that $14 billion, they take 10% of that and put it into political ads, so they actually get to hire their own bosses, Jim.
Now, I thought the story is really interesting. The size of this government waste is really quite alarming. But I'll also say it dovetails into the private sector, too. Trying to terminate an employee, okay, the first or second phone call goes to the attorney. So, again, we're in a society where it is very difficult to dismiss, and I think the government waste we're looking at is how difficult it is. These are
Although in the private sector, the taxpayers aren't paying.
Exactly. I agree.
I completely agree.
But I'm saying it's pervasive throughout both the government and the private sector.
All right, and let's talk a little bit about Airbnb, Jim, because remember the beginning of the year, like almost every week, its valuation went up a couple billion. I hadn't heard that much, Uber, Airbnb, but we know those are going to be huge deals when they come to the market. Everyone's going to want a piece of them. Do you still sense that sort of excitement that they're changing the world?
I mean, look, they definitely are changing the world. But the fact is Airbnb is valued right now probably greater than Hyatt and Wyndham, and it's operating illegally in most cities in the United States. So I do have a problem with this. On the question of the trust economy, I was a Zipcar user until I had too many bad experiences. No smoking in cars. Someone smoked. Leaving garbage. Cars not being returned on time, so I couldn't pick it up on time, and I moved on. I actually am very worried about we don't know who gets hurt in Airbnb. People who actually have bought into residential areas that now are being forced to essentially live in.
And we've heard about some of the Jim, what do you think?
I might be in the boring category because I like Norfolk Southern. I think there's abundant of opportunities in the transportation space, and I think that's a great name.
I got